All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about our diffusion panels, and again, this was the main diffusion panel that we created, and we're also going to test it against a couple of other variations just to see what the differences are. I'm also grabbing our DIY reflectors because we might need those to either block the light or to augment the light as well, so I'm going to grab those. So it's a nice bright sunny day. Finally, we've been waiting for it to not be overcast. And you know, the sun's starting to get pretty high in the sky. It's getting close to noon, and this is pretty typical. Now, I'm pretty close to butterfly lighting, right, which is our frontal direction. And you can see, like, I've got, you know, really dark circles underneath my eyes. It's kind of squinty. You know, we can see that there is a shadow directly below my nose, which would be our butterfly direction. But even though this is the most flattering light that we have during the middle of the day, it's still not really good, right? You know, it's got a lot of distractions. So what we're going to use is our diffusion panel, and the idea with the diffusion panel is that we're going to be placing it basically in between our light source, which is the sun, and the subject, which in this case is me. And so I'm going to grab the first diffusion panel that we looked at, just to see kind of what that looks like. So again, this is our diffusion panel that we created out of tissue paper and cardboard box. And so if I sit here, you know, that's our direct sunlight. I'm gonna go ahead and just take a quick picture. So let's pause for a moment and take a quick look at the difference in the quality of light. So this is what our full sun is looking like. And then on the right, this is what our diffusion panel should look like once we get it in place. You should notice the light's much softer and more even. There we go. And then we'll move our diffusion panel into place. And as we're doing the diffusion panel, what we want is, you know, obviously we don't want it in the frame. You know, if we pull it too far forward, it's going to be not blocking because it's kind of small. But what we want is for it to just barely cover the subject's head, right? And that way a lot of the light is still falling forward, and you can see that, you know, if I pull it back this way, I don't want a bright spot on my shirt either, right? So it's trying to, you know, fill that space so that it's, you know, basically covering the subject and also, you know, the body as much as we can. And again, that's why I was saying the bigger our diffusion panel, the better it's going to be. Now, for me, holding my arms up isn't going to be very comfortable, and it's not going to be, you know, very flattering to have my arms straight out. So I'm going to use some C-stands to hold it. But obviously, if you're working at home, you know, you might want to set it on self-timer as you're doing your portraits, you know, things like that. And I'm going to go ahead and switch over into portrait mode to take a portrait after I get the C-stands in place. So what the C-stands are going to do is basically hold it for me, since I don't have an assistant today. So that's our diffusion panel, and let's just really quickly check that against the, if we just did shade, and see if there's a big difference in the brightness and also the quality of the light. So just to do that, what I'm gonna do is, to start with, just so you guys can see, is I'm just gonna take our black diffusion panel, so it's gold on one side and black on the other. Right. And I'm gonna have the black side pointing down. And I'm just gonna hold it in here, right? So if I was to cut the light, right, you can see that the light quality is different, right? You can kind of see it's dropped and diminished a little bit. And you know, it's a little bit brighter along that top part as well. Whereas if I take this out and then it adjusts, you know, the light's a little bit more soft and even. So definitely we're getting some light to transmit through there. And just so you can kind of see, I'm gonna reverse this. So here's a shot of our light panel. You can see the light's kind of glowing as it's coming through that light source. So that was our first light panel. And like I said, there's lots of ways you can go about creating those. So let's look at a couple of other variations and see if there's a big difference in the way that light is looking. And I'll shoot a couple of pictures of it as well so we can have like a comparison at the end. So here's our comparison, and the image on the left is through our diffusion panel. You'll notice it's really soft and even, and the one to the right is with the shade, which we'll look at in just a second. And you'll notice that it's got a little more of a coarse shadow in the center, which and it's kind of some hot spots on the top of the head. So this was just with the light completely blocked, giving us basically shade, although it's not super open because it's kind of blocking in front of us. But let's go ahead and switch this out for the, let's try the clear lid and see what that looks like. So here's our clear lid, and you can see if we put the lid up, you know, it does block some of the light, but see how it kind of gets, you know, it does soften it a little bit, but it's creating these weird, you know, lines and things that are kind of going through it. So again, we're just putting it inside of a trash bag, but you could also use a pillowcase or a sheet or an old white t-shirt. You know, you could cut it to single ply as well. You know, there's lots of ways we can work with that, but now if we hold that up, you can see, you know, we're getting a really similar light to what we did with our other diffusion panel. There we are again in our, this one is with the lid with the trash bag, right? And again, you could use a pillowcase or a white t-shirt, or, you know, just something that's going to allow some of that light to transmit and also, you know, be a little more sturdy than maybe, say, the tissue paper. So this is what the light looks like through our lid with a white trash bag on the outside. So our next one was just a regular white lid, so it already has some amount of, you know, allowing the light to kind of pass through there. And so, you know, here's our just white lid. Again, if we hold that up, you know, really similar light, right? And let's see if we switch this around. So you can see if we place that in between the light source, you can kind of see it has that a little bit of a glow that goes through there. So that'll light up and give us our light source as opposed to it being a solid card. So there's our white lid diffusion panel. And again, you know, it's nice and open, it's even, you know, do the best you can to keep the subject, you know, in that area of diffused light. And what's typically going to happen is the background's going to kind of blow out, which is great. That just keeps the attention on the main subject. We can see too, if we even, you know, were to adjust this a little bit, you know, we could brighten up this part and allow the background to be even brighter. Obviously we don't want to go too bright. And it's probably cutting about one stop worth of light. So let's switch over. This is what the light looks like through our white lid. So that was our white lid. So then here's our last diffusion panel, which again is the largest one. And I made this so that it's a little bit more flexible. Again, the material is just like a thin piece of white plastic that was like for stuff in the garden. All right, so here we are again. You can see the lights still very harsh. And for right now, I'm just gonna put this directly above and then we'll cut them. Oh, there we go. So again, there's, you know, without the diffusion panel, with the diffusion panel. And again, the nice thing about this one is it can get rolled out, so we can make it much wider. Maximum size. All right, so there's our larger diffusion panel kind of set up. So here we are in our larger diffusion panel, and the nice thing about that is that we've got a little bit more room to move around, so it's not quite so tight. And you know, this is really the way that they film most TV and film. You know, even like a newscaster, like they'll just stand out, you know, on location, and usually the background will kind of blow out, and there'll be a nice soft even light. And you know, mine's a little bit you know, loose, so that when the wind comes through, it's kind of whipping around, but we could easily kind of cinch those things down so that it doesn't make noise, right, if it was for film. But for stills, it doesn't really matter. So let's take a quick look at a couple of those pictures. So this is what the light looks like through our larger diffusion panel. You can see it's still got a little bit of direction of light. This material could also be doubled up if we wanted to have, a little bit more diffusion. All right, so that's kind of how our diffusion panel is going to work. And you can see that, I'm still getting a very small amount of kind of that butterfly light that's going through there because we're still facing frontal. Now, for the other directions of light, if we wanted to do that, this is still going to be our main light source, right? So it's always going to kind of stay in, this direction, or at least this setup. It's really going to be a matter of shifting the perspective of the subject in relationship to the light source. So for Rembrandt, I'm just gonna shift in my chair slightly, and you can see right now it doesn't make any difference, right? The light looks the same there because it's still frontal to the camera. But if I take the camera, so once I turn this direction, you'll notice now that I've got a little bit more shadow to this side of the face, a little bit along this edge over there. It's not nearly as frontal. And, but my light source, everything stayed the same there. So it's really relative to that, to that light source. And, with something like this, I could start to bring in fill. If I wanted there to be a little bit less of that shadow, I could come in and start to brighten that up. Right, so we should see a subtle, shift as we start to brighten that part. But there's really no reason to. I mean, the light is still really, really soft and, isn't going to be a lot of shadow. But that'll give us our Rembrandt, so we can kind of play around with shifting those angles just a little bit. And then if we were to move it another 45 degrees, that would put us into split lighting. So here's what our Rembrandt light looks like. And you can see it's got a little more shadow on that left-hand side. All right, so that was our Rembrandt. So in order to move into split lighting, we're just gonna shift another 45 degrees. And so we're just gonna bring the camera around this direction. So there we go. And so now, the light is brighter on this side and darker on that side. And it just gives a little more form to the light. If we didn't want to be completely frontal, frontal is probably the most flattering, but if we wanted to have a little more drama, but still soft, even light, we can just, again, the light source hasn't moved. It's just still diffusing the sunlight. It's just now relative to where that diffusion panel is, we're over, at 90 degrees to that light source. So there we go. And there's our split lighting. So you can see it's got a little bit more shadow even, again, on that left-hand side. And if we wanted to create a little bit more drama, we might want there to be shadow. Now there's still a lot of light over here that's bouncing around and filling in this side of the face. So we could use our black diffusion panel, or our black, our black fill card. So we could, if that was the light there, we could bring that in and start to darken in those shadows if we wanted there to be a little bit more, a little more form, because there is still quite a bit of light bouncing around in those other areas. So, we may want to work with those, or if I wanted to even it out, I could also, add some warmth. I could bring in my gold reflector. So lots of variations, but that should give you a pretty good idea of how you're going to go about using the diffusion panel. And I want you guys to just, show me what you guys created, move around, try the light in slightly different directions, and experiment with what ways you can create soft light anywhere in the middle of the afternoon. All right, looking forward to see what you guys do.